I never thought I'd have to outsmart my own neighbor just to enjoy the tomatoes I grew in my own backyard. But here we are. What started as a simple hobby, growing fresh vegetables to avoid overpriced, tasteless store-bought ones, turned into a ridiculous game of cat and mouse, all thanks to one person. Karen. You know the type. The neighbor who acts like everything in a 5-house radius belongs to them. The one who complains about kids playing outside, reports people for having their trash cans out too long, and somehow always has time to peek over fences but never enough time to mind their own business. Karen was that neighbor, and unfortunately for me, she had a particular interest in my tomatoes. At first, I thought I was just imagining things. Maybe I forgot to pick a few, or maybe an animal got to them. But no. The more I paid attention, the more I noticed something strange, ripe tomatoes disappearing overnight, vines looking a little too handled. Then, one evening, I saw it. A shadow creeping along the fence, reaching over and plucking my hard-earned tomatoes like she had grown them herself. Now I could have confronted her. I could have asked nicely. But something told me Karen wasn't the reasonable conversation type. So instead, I decided to get creative. I set a trap. And let me tell you, it worked beautifully. I've always loved growing my own food. There's something satisfying about planting a tiny seed, watching it sprout, and eventually picking fresh, juicy tomatoes right off the vine. No weird chemicals, no overpriced grocery store nonsense, just food that I grew myself. It started as a hobby, but over time, it became something I looked forward to every day. I'd wake up, step outside, check on my plants, and feel a little sense of pride knowing I was growing something with my own hands. Of course, gardening isn't just about tossing seeds in the dirt and waiting. It takes effort. Watering, trimming, making sure the plants get enough sunlight but not too much, dealing with pests. It's a daily routine. Tomatoes, especially, need attention. You have to keep an eye out for bugs, watch for signs of disease, and make sure they have the right support so they don't collapse under their own weight. It's not easy, but it's worth it. At least, that's what I thought until I realized I wasn't the only one enjoying my tomatoes. Enter Karen. She was one of those neighbors, the kind who acted like she ran the whole street, even though she wasn't actually part of the HOA. She loved to enforce rules that didn't exist, scold people for things that had nothing to do with her, and peek over fences like she was the neighborhood security guard. I once caught her inspecting my trash cans, shaking her head like I had committed a crime by throwing something away. That's just who she was, always watching, always judging, and always finding ways to make life just a little more annoying for everyone around her. At first, I didn't think much of it when a few tomatoes went missing. Maybe I miscounted. Maybe an animal got to them. It happens. But then it kept happening. Every time a tomato was just about ripe enough to pick, it was gone the next morning. Not half-eaten, not scattered on the ground like a raccoon had a feast, just cleanly removed, like someone had carefully taken it. That's when I started to suspect something was off, so I paid closer attention. One evening, I checked my plants before going inside. Everything looked good, plenty of nearly ripe tomatoes still hanging on the vines. But by morning, 3 of the biggest, reddest ones were missing. And it wasn't just random picking. The vines weren't torn or trampled like they would be if an animal had been rummaging through them. Instead, it was a clean cut, like someone had deliberately reached in, grabbed what they wanted, and left. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a hungry squirrel or a curious bird. This was a person. And given that Karen had a long history of treating the neighborhood like her personal kingdom, I had a pretty good idea who that person was. At first, I tried to handle it. The nice way I didn't want to start some neighborhood war over a few tomatoes, so I kept it casual. While chatting with a few neighbors one evening, I casually brought it up. "Hey, has anyone else noticed missing fruits or vegetables from their garden?" I asked, acting like I was just making small talk. Maybe, just maybe, Karen would feel a little guilty and stop. But of course, Karen was good. She put on her best concerned neighbor act. "Oh, that's terrible. Maybe it's those pesky teenagers walking around at night," she said, shaking her head. "You just can't trust people these days." She even had the audacity to suggest I should be more careful. "You should really think about putting up a fence," she added, like I hadn't already caught her peeking over mine multiple times. I wasn't buying it. So I tried something else. I made a small sign and stuck it right next to my tomato plants. "Please don't take my tomatoes." Simple, polite, even a little friendly. The kind of sign that, if you weren't guilty, wouldn't bother you at all. But if you were, it would make you think twice. The next morning, the sign was still there. But guess what wasn't? More tomatoes. That was it. No more games. I decided to catch her red-handed. I set up a small outdoor camera, positioned it perfectly to cover the tomato plants, and waited. A few nights went by with nothing. I started to wonder if, maybe, somehow, Karen had gotten the hint. Then, at exactly 11 p.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I opened the app, and there she was, Karen, in a bathrobe, sneaking into my yard like some kind of tomato ninja. She moved quickly, grabbing handfuls of my tomatoes like she was harvesting her own garden. No hesitation. No guilt. She even took a moment to inspect them before stuffing them into a plastic bag. Watching it made my blood boil. I could have marched over there the next morning, video in hand, and confronted her. I could have sent the footage to the HOA, the entire neighborhood group chat, or even the police if I really wanted to push it. But as I sat there, watching Karen's little midnight heist, I realized something. I had a much better idea. As I sat there watching Karen on my security footage, stuffing my tomatoes into a plastic bag like she was on some kind of midnight grocery run, an idea hit me. A simple, brilliant, evil idea. If she wanted to steal from my garden so badly, what if I gave her something she'd really regret taking? That's when I thought of Carolina Reapers. Now, if you don't know, these little devils are some of the hottest peppers in the world. We're talking over 1 million Scoville units, so hot they can make grown men cry, sweat, and question all their life choices. I once saw a guy take a single bite of one and immediately chug a whole carton of milk while gasping for air. Karen had no idea what was coming. So, I got to work. I went out and bought a few Carolina Reaper plants, carefully placing them where my tomato plants used to be. The genius part? When they're still unripe, Reapers have a similar shape and color to tomatoes, smooth, round, and oh so tempting. To make sure she wouldn't suspect a thing, I even mixed in a few regular tomato plants so it wouldn't look suspicious. If Karen wanted to help herself to my garden, I was going to make sure her next snack was unforgettable. To make sure I didn't miss a single moment of this, I upgraded my camera setup. I adjusted the angle for the perfect view, making sure I'd catch her reaction in full detail. And just in case she struck at a weird hour, I set up motion alerts so I'd be notified the second she stepped foot near my plants. Now, all I had to do was wait. The night finally came. Just like clockwork, Karen snuck into my garden, creeping through the yard like she was on some top-secret mission. I got the motion alert on my phone and quickly pulled up the live feed. There she was. Same bathrobe, same plastic bag, same shameless attitude. She reached for the plants, picking a handful of what she thought were my perfectly ripe tomatoes. She had no idea she was holding some of the spiciest peppers on the planet. And then, as if the universe decided to bless me with the perfect moment, she popped one into her mouth right there on camera. It took about 2 seconds for it to hit her. First, she froze. Then the coughing started deep, desperate like her throat had just been set on fire. She bent forward, hands on her knees, frantically waving at her mouth like she could fan the heat away. But the worst part? She swallowed it. That's when all hell broke loose. She stumbled back, flailing her arms, gasping for air like she'd just eaten a live coal. She started hopping in place, then bolted full sprint back to her house, bathrobe flapping behind her like a superhero cape. I sat there watching, absolutely losing it. I had never seen someone move that fast in my life. The next day, I went through the footage frame by frame, watching as realization spread across her face. The moment her brain connected the dots when she understood she had just stolen and eaten the spiciest pepper known to man was pure gold. For days after, Karen completely avoided me. No more fake friendly waves, no more peeking over the fence, just pure radio silence. She didn't dare admit what happened, but she did start complaining to the neighbors about how someone was growing dangerous plants in their garden. Guess what, Karen? They weren't dangerous until you stole them. A few days passed, and I thought maybe Karen had learned her lesson. Maybe she'd keep her hands to herself and stop sneaking into my yard. But of course, Karen wasn't the type to admit defeat. Instead of owning up to what she did, she tried to turn the whole thing around on me. One morning, I got a notice from the HOA Karen had filed a complaint. According to her, my garden was a safety hazard and posed a risk to the community. I had to laugh. This woman had literally stolen food from my yard, eaten it without knowing what it was, and now she was trying to get me in trouble for it. Then came the HOA meeting drama. Karen showed up acting like she was speaking on behalf of the entire neighborhood, talking about how dangerous my plants were. "What if a child got into his yard?" she said, shaking her head like she actually cared about anyone but herself. "Someone could get seriously hurt." Of course, she conveniently left out the part where she stole them herself. But here's the thing. Most of my neighbors weren't buying it. They knew Karen. They knew how she was always stirring up drama, always looking for a way to control things. A few of them even smirked when she started ranting, like they could already tell where this was going. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. "I'm just growing normal plants in my own yard. There's no rule against that." I looked around the room. If someone happens to trespass and eat something without knowing what it is, well, that sounds like their problem. The HOA agreed. There was nothing in the rulebook about what I could or couldn't grow in my own garden. No fines, no warnings, just Karen, sitting there fuming while the rest of the room moved on. You'd think after all that, Karen would just cut her losses and move on. But no. She had one last trick up her sleeve, and it backfired spectacularly. A few nights after the HOA meeting, I got another motion alert on my phone. Guess who was creeping into my yard again? That's right, Karen. This time, she wasn't even being sneaky about it. Maybe she thought I had removed the peppers, or maybe she was just that desperate for fresh tomatoes. Either way, she was back at it, reaching over the fence like she hadn't just humiliated herself in front of half the neighborhood. But here's where it got even better. One of my neighbors saw the whole thing. He happened to be outside, taking out his trash, when he caught Karen mid-theft, and instead of staying quiet, he called her out right then and there. "Hey, Karen, stealing more vegetables?" His voice was loud enough to wake up the entire block. Karen froze. Then, without saying a word, she bolted, probably realizing she had zero excuses left. Word spread fast. By the next morning, Karen's little stunt was the talk of the neighborhood. The HOA sent her a warning about trespassing, and whatever little credibility she had left completely disappeared. No one took her complaint seriously anymore. The self-appointed queen of the block had officially lost her throne. And just like that, Karen was done. No more fake smiles, no more lectures about HOA rules, and best of all, no more stolen tomatoes. Looking back, I couldn't have planned it better. Sometimes, the best revenge is just letting people expose themselves. Karen did all the work. I just made sure the lesson burned a little extra, and if she ever thinks about trying it again, well, I still have plenty of Carolina Reapers.